So tonight I'd like to talk about old Iranian singers from the 1920s to the 1960s, and mostly female singers. And somebody made a documentary. Someone named Bahman Maghsoudloo made a documentary called Razor's Edge: The Legacy of Iranian Actresses. This is the ISIS, I call it the 1979 ISIS revolution in Iran. And this person made a documentary about it. All these actresses, female actresses, that were active before the revolution and so forth. And it was shown um, in different whatchamacallit, festivals. And it was premiered 2 years ago, I think, in a few different cities. And if you happen to speak Farsi, uh, there's a user on Vimeo. This is the address, vimeo.com, and the user's name is Aparat on BBC. Aparat meaning a projector. Has a few interesting documentaries, but it's mostly in Farsi. And they have two parts of the three parts of this movie. In Farsi, it's worth seeing. There's other documentaries that they have too, but that's for if you speak Farsi. But if not, that's a different story. Um, so I'm going to close this window. But I was inspired because I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were talking about how lately you find really good video and audio footages from the 1960s and the 1970s Iran, whereas after the revolution, it was so hard to find any footage. I mean, we couldn't find any good footage, except for archives from BBC and so forth. And I remember my dad back in 1979, he would insist that we should take our Super 8, or was it a 16 millimeter camera we had? I forget. That we should take it on the streets and make as much footage as possible about the demonstrations that were going on in 1979. He thought whether the revolution succeeds or not, it doesn't matter. The footage is very important, and I guess my older brothers were in charge of the camera, and we always felt like, huh, what? we, we didn't really appreciate how important it was what he was telling us. And in every demonstration, sometimes we would see people standing around with cameras, videotaping with fancy cameras. So we thought the radio television is making archives or creating footage anyways. So there's no need for us to do anything. But it's always good to have good footage. And this is the premiere of that movie in Beverly Hills 2 years ago. I don't know if you can see this. Or can I blow this up a little bit? Yeah. Okay. So so that's that. But recently there's been a lot of good footage, and we've been wondering how the heck where all this footage coming from. The Manoto TV has a lot, but initially I thought possibly they were just getting things from the archives from the BBC and Voice of different news agencies around the world from Australia and so, and some of it may be that. But I think we came to the conclusion that possibly they're getting some footage from directly from the governments, the state radio television archives in Iran, and someone's leaking them out. So it occurred to me that, hey, why not I start looking for any audio clips of, for example, Ghamar Moluk. For years, Ghamar Moluk Bazari is considered the greatest singer. Even though she was a woman, you don't put her in the category of women only. She was considered the greatest singer of the 20th century in Iran. And forever there's been very few clips of her So her records were on old shellac or even more primitive records from the 1930s and 40s, 1920s, 1930s. Then it was on magnetic tapes that were erased by some people intentionally. Some of her performances were live. Really, for the longest time, we've been looking for clips of her singing, and it's been just a minute here, a minute there, terrible audio quality. So I started looking around. So I have found a whole bunch of people that and I made uh, playlists that I'm gonna share with you. But it's kind of interesting. So the difference between talking about female actresses from Iran is that it's easier for a Western audience to connect with actresses than with Persian singers because the Persian singing is monophonic, very intense, has quarter tones, and it's not exactly an easy pill to swallow for a Western audience. So, but here I found quite a few clips of Ghamar singing. This is actually there's only one or two actual videos of her from, I guess, in some movie she sang, but then the rest are just audio. 16 minutes here. Audio quality is better compared to what we have been finding for the past 40 years. So, and a whole hour here, 19 minutes and so forth. So let's listen to her here. Uh oh. Okay. That's a nice Franco-Belgian grip on the The violin sounds so terrible. Like the Camonche, basically, very sad and very gloomy. And this is towards the, later stages of her life. Uh, she supposedly was doing morphine. She was addicted to drugs, one of them being morphine, and she began to sing out of tune. And she was relegated to second or third orchestras in the radio. Then they basically called her off. Towards the end of her life, she was performing in cafes, for low class cafes in South Tehran, and so every Joe Schmo gangster could claim that, oh yeah, we went and we saw Bamar, at such and such cafe. She has there are recording engineers who have insane accounts of her singing. There's so many accounts of her that people driving around town, if you passed by within a kilometer of a place where she was performing, you could hear her live voice without microphones. They were not using microphones back then. We're talking in private parties, private gatherings of the wealthy, or health minister, or uh, minister of treasury, such and so. They would send her gifts and things to get her to come and perform, and a lot of times she would blow them off. There's so many stories of her promising to perform for a cab driver's daughter because she was having a wedding, promising the cab driver that I'm gonna come and sing at your. Uh, they, they said the cab, and we're talking about a horse carriage, really. Right? When I say cab, the horse carriage stopped and was driving her someplace. They stopped in front of a cafe. They were playing her records, and the cabbie, the carriage driver, said, "Oh my God, it would be so nice. What would it be, if this we could have this woman perform in our my daughter's wedding tomorrow night and so forth. I would give everything I have. Wow, her voice is amazing." And without telling the carriage driver that it's her, she would say, "Oh, give me your address. Maybe I can try to see if I can get her to come over." And then she would be invited by really wealthy or really influential government people the same night, and she would reject them because she would have to go and play for the carriage driver's daughter and so forth. Anyway, so her fame went down pretty much halfway through her life. She was addicted. She was singing out of tune, and possibly this could be one of them. There's so many accounts of her. People would bring her mink coats to her concerts, and she would just walk out, take the mink coat, and put it on the shoulders of some female homeless woman on the street, right immediately getting out of the out of the concert hall. There's so many accounts of her, even towards the end of her life when she was getting collecting. She was collecting her retirement uh, pay from the radio. She would have to go there. They made her every week. There were people who didn't like her, apparently. They erased the magnetic tapes that she was recorded on at the radio. She would have to go there to sign and get her check for 600 tomans, and then she would immediately have a train of homeless people, like four homeless people who knew her, who would be following her, and she would like cash the check and give bits of it to every of these homeless people. She was extremely selfless. In fact, at some point, I was wondering if she was a transgender, because I mean, a lot of the stuff I'm talking about is worthy of a few PhD theses, not just on her, but other people too. I wonder if she was transgender or something, or hermaphrodite, because she was always brokenhearted. Her relationships never lasted more than a few months or a few weeks, or maybe once or twice. And she could not have a child. And the stuff that she was doing, appearing without a scarf in 1920s Iran, and on a concert stage, and performing. And mind you, back then there were different forces. There were pro-modernity forces, and upper class of westernized people, influential people who wanted to have such symbols of modernity, women who are gaining freedom, women who are performing on the stage and so forth, showing their chest and so forth, and not covering their faces and so forth. And then there were traditional forces against them, so there was always a push and shove. So there were people who would be admiring her, but there were also people who would send threat letters to kill her and so forth. Anyway, so here we get to hear her singing. I'm not sure if it's the greatest example of her singing, but definitely the accompaniment in traditional Persian music is always, to me, is very weak, because at best they're just playing something very soft and undertone, not trying to dominate, not trying to complement, and it's more like a subject counter subject, repeating the subject within a time lag. I can feel Yeah, it sounds very amateurish, frankly. It doesn't sound too stellar. And the video spent so much time showing this child and people taking their coat and so forth. It's not really focusing on the music. It's part of a movie, and she really supposedly hated being part of this. Okay. Yeah, like I said, it's kind of difficult. It's not an easy pill to swallow for a Western audience. But anyways, there is a lot of her clips now that we have. Now, one thing that I noticed with a lot of these recordings, I think they're sped up. So I downloaded some extensions for Chrome where I can slow down and I can transpose it down by 2-3 semitones, and then things sound normal, believe it or not. So when you play it at normal pitch, it's a little bit too high pitch. It sounds like a piccolo. And that's her adopted daughter, and she's alive, and she was active on Facebook up until a few years ago that I know. Okay, so some people may complain, why did you change the speed? It's a little bit too fast. Let's skip to some other point. So as you can tell, it's pretty slow. Okay. Anyways, it's better to play these yourself if you're interested on using my playlists, because the audio doesn't come through. Already the audio is low quality, so when I play it using screen recording, it doesn't come out well. So there's quite a few files here. There's another video even. Let's see if we have. See, everything sounds sped up. But that's pitch. Okay, that's the speed. You get the gist of it. All right, so we move on. Yeah, she, we still don't have a book written about her. There's magazine articles and so forth. A lot of the information is secondhand. A lot of people have passed away. Her stepdaughter is still alive. I think she's still alive. Zobeide something is her name. I forget. But then I found another woman from that era, RoohAngiz, which I really didn't know a whole lot about. I had heard the name, but that was it. Um, she sounds in tune and every bit as good as Ghamar. I really didn't know a whole lot about her, but based on this, again, it sounds. And there's nothing, there's no link on her songs, albums, diary, born 1904. So not much age difference between her. How come we can't find this anymore? I'm not sure. Is that the same person? Actress. Oh, I see. She played in the first Iranian movie. This is another one. English wiki page on her? No. Okay, we feel. Alright, so this playlist. yeah, so this one has quite a few records too. RoohAngiz, and it's interesting. I didn't find anything in English on her, but she sounds pretty much on par with Ghamar from what I can tell. Then Ahdieh Khansari is a big old timer, is a man, and there's a Gulha archives. Huh. I just made these playlists and a whole bunch of these videos are missing now. Qu'est-ce que c'est bizarre? C'est un peu bizarre. Okay, Twitter. No. Okay. So, alright. Did we lose our... Yes. Alright, so we go back here at my Ahdieh Khansari we looked at. I'm not sure. I'm not a big fan of... I was gonna bring up... the Gulfa database. This is a website in London or in England someplace, and they have documented all these radio music shows in Iran with whatever orchestras, and you can search by the number, the episode number, or the musicians and so forth, what instruments were used. Instruments. So I've searched for the clarinet, but oud, barbad, lute, kamanche, ney, piano, so forth. There's more down here that you can't see. Alright. The information is like not 100% complete. They're missing some info. Right, so we close that. Another playlist is Vegan. Vegan was a pop song, kind of a Iran's answer to what you might call it, Frank Sinatra, kind of smooth voice, Armenian heritage. And I had no idea that he had performed in the Gulha radio uh, orchestra a few times. But I found different numbers, but they all seem to be pretty much the same pieces that are repeated in different shows. And I guess he performed with Puran and he performed with Elahim. I think this 277 one I really like because he was performing with Elahim and they had an Armenian orchestra, which immediately you can tell they sound a lot more Western and more tight compared to the Persian orchestra. Minute 9 is pretty interesting from here on. His voice is really beautiful. Okay, so I'm trying to go back and find Elah's voice too.
شب قصه تو در چشمم چهره تو در سینه من آتش تو پنهان شد.
See, already we're hearing a more Western, she Elohe is showing her effeminate, feminine voice in the low register, not pushing too hard like the typical Persian singing. Let's look up Elohe. She, I think, died here in the U.S.
موی سیاه پریدوشم روی چمن گلزار جهان در نظرم توفان شد
1934, that's around my mom's age when she was born. My mom passed away 2011, and they kind of look similar. That is bizarre.
در راه عشق به سر تیشه زدن آسان نیست. کرد فرهاد در این مرحله شیرین کاری.
I don't remember seeing her in movies, actually. Okay, so very beautiful, and more, of course, a more Western treatment of the whole thing. And the orchestra a lot of times sounds pretty tight. And they have an Armenian composer too. And this sounds like a typical Persian orchestra, radio orchestra, now from that era. 1950s, 60s, I don't know. We don't know the date of the original broadcast. And the archive doesn't have much information. Okay, it's better to listen to it directly and not. But this one, the 277, was the best version that I found. The other versions seem very similar, but the audio quality is not exactly the same. Let me show you what I'm talking about. It begin. Let's stop there. So see, begin played in the Gulha, and we could do a search in that archive too. Do I still have it up? No, but it was number 61, 50, 266. But they all sound kind of similar, more or less, and the audio quality is not the same. But 277 is the good one. Alright, so we move on to Ghamar Moluk. Oh my god, 10-15 years ago in Los Angeles, there appeared this old man who would get on the dance stage and grab the microphone and whirl around like really fast and do crazy things, and you just felt like, who the heck is that? And then we heard that this is Ghamar, old man too, mind you, like he was 65, 70. and he's still alive and living in Tehran. And we heard from one of our music teachers that he was a classmate of Shajarian, the classical singer. That this guy actually did study Persian classical music. However, at some point he became more of a minstrel, playing to the audiences, doing popular numbers, cheap, cheesy stuff for money, for attention, God knows what. And he couldn't sing, or maybe he wasn't interested in singing in a classical manner. So I looked him up on the Gulha program, on that archive. He has performed so many times with the radio orchestra on so many different occasions. And his voice, to my ear, is actually superior to Shahja's. As a young man, he had an amazing voice. Maybe not super creative, but I wouldn't call Shahja as we call him. I would not call Shahja creative either. He's not that creative. He pretty much has a bunch of templates that he repeats a lot. So I don't know if I should bring up any of these. Do I have a video of him singing and dancing? My God, look how many radio orchestral blah blah pieces he did, episodes. I don't know, let's bring up one just to listen to something. And then we go to his dance stage. Okay. The instrument violin in the hands of Persians becomes a very sad instrument. Let's see, can we find just for you to have a sense of how the orchestral part was, like the whole. Okay, this doesn't sound like doesn't start with an orchestral. Okay, it sounds like more of an improv session. You barely hear any sound. 10 minutes of single instruments doing a slow song and dance. Okay, this is not a very good audio quality. Yeah, that was not a good example. It's not a good audio quality either. Should we go to the next one? I also wanted to see if there's any orchestra. Does it start with an orchestra? Monophonic. Typical monophonic Middle Eastern orchestra. Not a very good example. Yeah, that was the problem for the longest time. I abhorred these shows when they were playing them live on radio as a kid, me hearing them, and years later, because it always sounded like they were made by the pound, as they say in Farsi. They were just more about quantity and not quality. Just fill up time or something. But over the years, I realized that you have to dig through a lot of them to find little gems here and there. Anyway, so let's look back at the playlist. Now I want to show a segment where he is singing next to Ahdieh, and then do I have his dance piece? Gotta have the dance piece. Uh-huh. In fact, I was going to use the lyric for this song for a Farsi lesson. It's so ridiculous that I thought it'd be funny to do the lyrics, like read it and explain what it means. So this is a moment. You told me you told me wiggle your butt, and I did. It's really good for a person to wiggle their butts. And then Jamal shows up. And then some movie. What was the movie? When he showed up. Oh, of course, drugs too. We forget. He's jumping. Nice to wink. Labi namakine to. Your salty lips are totally for sucking. Okay. That's enough, I think. She's still alive. Jamile, when she showed up, she was considered like a good dancer, and she had a good. She was in good shape, and she's still alive. I think she lives in the Valley in Los Angeles, and she has a pretty destitute life. She's not really doing well financially, from what I've heard. And Jamale Vafai, I think, is in Iran and he's respected. It's much better for old people to live in Iran. It's much more respect and much more attention. But at any rate, this is kind of a minstrel version of this Jamal Vafai, and hilarious lyrics. And it's interesting. Now that I watch her, all of these dancers in these movies, I feel like they only know like about 7, 8, or 10 moves. They're really, you know, they don't have to have a whole lot of repertoire of different moves to be so, you know, to get so much attention. The rest is just showing skin, I guess. Now let's go back. Isn't there a way of shrinking this playlist? What do we do? Okay, so I'm just gonna go back to the playlist, I was going to show you this one bit where he's singing with Ahdieh. Now Ahdieh is like a diva, was a diva. She passed away, I think, on stage. What, 10, 15 years ago? She is considered by so many pop music audiences to be like the great diva, unrepeatable, blah blah blah. But in the realm of classical music, she was not really considered a top-notch singer. At times, she was off. She has a beautiful voice. She has a pretty powerful voice, but this here, she's sitting down with Jamal in some kind of TV show, probably early 70s, and he gets permission usually from the other person to have the microphone and sing a little bit, and immediately wants to hand back the microphone back. And of course, he does his one of his lessons, or the uh, the bel canto that he does here could have had more, maybe arpeggios and not just be a few simple trills, but it's still pretty impressive. You can see you can see how it is face turning. Look. Let's go back a little bit. Look at the reaction. These women don't have the same ears. They're not singers, so they don't hear it the way how it is here. Look at their face. Wow. Mike immediately pats it back. The violin playing is almost drawn for like really in a whole different cloud. Okay, so they're singing Abu Atta, which is like Aeolian. No, oh, yo, ho, shur, yo, da, 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 do. Okay, so can we do a backing track to them? I don't know, I'm being bad. Can I add a twist backing track. Let's see. I'm typing backing track. Phrygian in D Phrygian. D Phrygian groovy backing track. But I think they started with Aeolian on G, and then they descended back to Shur or Phrygian in D. Isn't that what they did? Let's sing. Yeah. I could also look for Aeolian. Okay, well, let's do the Phrygian part, which was the end of the song. So let's look for Aeolian. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. Let's do Aeolian in G. Quest, backing track. Aeolian. Pourquoi pas alors? This is A Aeolian. I could pitch it down, but here's this. I've seen this before, I think. Hip hop groove, backing track, C minor. I could just say G natural minor is the same thing, really. I like Quist better, but you know what? Let's do A, but then I'm gonna pitch it down. Let's bring it down. Two flats basically. But I think we did. دل از من بردی ای دلبر بفن آهسته آهسته. Anyways, alright, so we move on. I already did a video on Jamshid Ali Murad, but that was in Farsi. Elahe, I think, well, Elahe and Puran were very similar, and they look different. Puran looked like a chubbier version of Brigitte Bardot, Persian version. Elahe looked a little bit more masculine, maybe, and they both had kind of similar voices. It's very interesting, Puran and Elahe. Now, we did look up did look up Ahdieh, Ahdieh, uh, towards the end of her life, all her collaborations with Persian traditional composers. Bottom line, the country was lacking good composers and good songwriters that could do a more of a Western style music, or they could westernize Persian classical traditional music. Because all of these quarter tone scales, as I have shown in many of my videos, they can be harmonized, they can be polyphonic. You could have backing tracks, you could have accompaniment, you could have all kinds of things. But all her, same thing with Puran. Let me look up Puran also. All her collaborations with these Persian traditional things, they all, they're not really as beautiful as the sample we heard with um, Vigen over there. The Vigen, let's see, this is Puran. So now she aged quickly, I guess you could say. This is her in her like 30s, 40s. But you saw her looking like a bit of a. Oh, did I show the video with her as a kind of chubby Brigitte Bardot in a movie? I don't think I have shown it. Uh, that this is her a bio. Farah. They both actually had beautiful names, real names. This one's real name was Farah, and the other one was Bahar, I think. And pretty sad. Oh my God, the age is so short. Um, they had by the time the 70s rolled and then the revolution, these guys were has-beens. They couldn't sing that beautifully anymore, and their the repertoire that they were singing was more traditional Persian stuff, and it wasn't quite interesting. It was monophonic and whiny and not very interesting. By the time the 70s rolled, you had more Western um, arranged music, polyphonic, with more of a rock kind of sometimes formations and or other instruments. So the traditional types were losing the ground. So the English Wikipedia didn't have much. It's very interesting because Elohe, they both, Elohe had a harsher life, but she lived longer actually. Elohe, her voice went down. Both of them had pretty weak musical collaborations towards the end, and and it seemed like overall Puran from the videos and movies you see, she played in a lot of movies. She was more attractive. She got a lot more movies, a lot more deals. Maybe she married a wealthier husband. But she went to Iran after the revolution. She was living in America. She went to Iran after the revolution and she got caught there. They would not let her leave. And she had some kind of disease, I forget. They wouldn't let her leave the country, go back to America and get cured. And she died at the age of, I forget, 55. Right here, 57. She died early in 1990. Let me see if I can find any clips of her singing. Very similar to Elaheh, this one that I showed before. Again, all of these are worthy of PhD theses and more research. Um, it's amazing because by the 70s, Hayedeh was a big name and Elaheh was like forgotten. And she showed up one time on one of these Rang TV shows, colorful colors, whatever, Rang, colors and colors, um, variety show to sing, and she had bad makeup, bad outfit, everything. It wasn't really her best. And the compositions that these guys were doing, they were old school, and nobody cared about that sort of music anymore. That kind of radio orchestra at best kind of music. I have Mahvash in the another playlist of Bazari film movies and so forth. I happen to have one clip of Puran singing. Let me just show you that. Maybe you can see her as a young. Yeah, this is not the best example of her singing. In some melodies, she kind of really sings like an amateur.
چمن آغوشم توی من بگشایی چو دو چشمت افسون کنی چه خبر از دردم داری تو نخوندی راز مهنت ز نگاه حسرت باری همه شب من دامان هجرانت گیرم تو بیا تا چون آتش دامانت گیرم.
So this isn't from the movie. However, this is my title for this. More and more of this cafe scene. And a lot of Western instruments. What's interesting in these movies is that the visuals are really westernized, the clothing, the makeup, and so forth. They were catching up with Western styles quickly, but the sound, the moment you turn on the sound, it's still like 19th century Persian ghajar music a lot of times. It's not sophisticated. They don't have that whole, um, 18th, 19th century culture, Baroque and romantic music behind them. Everyone drinking alcohol. And the recording is pretty bad too. It's like they should have. It's a little bit too dry. There's no reverb or anything. It's not studio massage. Piccolos and clarinet, flute. شکوفه عمرم تا بدمید خزانه هستی نهال من قامت تا بکشید خزانه هستی. Okay. Let's see. How do I go back to my playlist? Yeah, so this is another. See, I was gonna cover everyone from Ghamar all the way to Bazari minstrel types. Um, Halfway is, of course, Huron and Elahe. They were extremely regarded as amazing, talents back then in the 50s, 40s and 50s, and well, 50s probably, yeah, and set in the 60s, and then you have Bazari types, a lot of movie types that were just singing for. Here's another woman that most people don't even know about, Shahin Shobeiri. Extremely Western look again, that kind of Brigitte Bardot hairdo and everything, except chubby. So the look of things are extremely Western, the musicians and everything, but the music is monophonic and kind of primitive. You see, look, the Franco-Prussian grip, the bow tie. This is Ahdieh Tajvidi, probably when he was 30 or 40. So, but the music is whiny, and this is her in the 80s in America. Is it a cassette? Oh, it's a cassette of her. Looks like a character from Dynasty, but the music, the music is like so primitive. Yet she's dressed like a character from a Hollywood movie from the '80s. There's actually a music video she did in the '80s too. Anyways, there's a lot of characters, and now here we're getting into the more minstrel movie characters, sing and dance and cabaret types. Afat. Afat is a cute kind of girl who was a bit of an actress, a bit of a dancer, singer. She was kind of closest to the package that the movie industry there was asking for. You can tell from the 1920s to the 30s to the 40s to the 50s, they wanted to obviously have women doing more and more in the movies. Can we find a young woman who's beautiful? Can we find a woman who can dance? Can we find a woman who can sing? Can we find a woman who's okay kissing the other character without getting into trouble with her family? You can just see gradually how they managed to push the envelope. One reason was obviously to make money. Another reason was uh, to push the envelope too, to kind of push women into the forefront. Here's Elahe in some movie. So Elahe, who did play in one or two movies as a young woman, early on her uh, screen name was Patty Che, and so she did play in one or two movies, I guess, early on, but I don't remember her later on. Let me see if I can skip around ski resorts and everything like that. Wow, okay. Showing people skiing. Okay, here's another song. Looks like my mom. That's kind of scary. Anyways, so we got to see a clip of Elahe too. Anyways, here in these movies, you can hear them sometimes singing okay, and sometimes they're out of tune. Um, again, to a Western ear, this kind of music is not easy to swallow. Someone, used to listening to Marilyn Horne or Cecilia Bartoli or such and such, it's not, it's a little bit difficult. But then again, you have to consider what material, what milieu these artists had back then in that country, what kind of training they could get, what composers or arrangers they had available, what musicians. Just the fact that in these movies we see a lot of clarinet, but really there are not that many really good musicians who could play more complicated pieces. Anyways, there's a lot of characters that I could cover. I'm not sure who would be interested in this video. Afat, again, it would be cute to listen to something, but here's a dance scene. This scene is not Western. All the way, okay, you could say they're wearing suits at least. Clarinet here. I think this is Shahrazad. There's a documentary about her life. Yeah, the instruments, the clarinet, the violin. Foruzan and Malak Mateen in that shot. Is that Fardin, by the way? Is this Fardin before he became somebody or somebody else? Probably, I'm not sure. Anyways, there's a lot of characters. Bahman Mufid, my second cousin. Um, that Shahzad woman that I mentioned who got up and started dancing was in that Maghsoudloo movie, and there's a whole documentary made about her and how destitute she is right now. She's alive, living in poverty, and no one wants to give her any jobs. You can see in Bahman, my second cousin, you can see the African blood, curly hair, the African look, the mulatto look. A lot of Persians have African blood in them, and they just don't know it. All right, so we go back. I think this is the Shahzad woman. It's like she was saying, at this old age, people don't even let me take care of their children. I cannot even work as a child care person at people's homes because they think I'm corrupt. Even though she's written film scripts and directed movies, and she has a book of poetry that she published and became popular. Parivash. Is that a movie? I don't even know. I haven't checked exactly all of these. I don't remember. Um, Mahvash. I mean, she's scary basically. As a young woman, she supposedly was cute. I mean, I've seen one tiny shot where she was actually beautiful, but in every other shot, you just go, "What the hell?" And to think that so many gangsters would kill for her, and there would be fights breaking out in cabarets for her. I never heard of this gang of Haft Kachalun, the seven Baldies. There were 8 brothers who were gangsters, but somehow they were called seven Baldies, even though there were 8. And there was like bloody like fights in the cabarets over her, and she looked scary in a lot of these movies. And yet, she died in a car accident early on, and you see her song and dance, you just go, "What the hell? How could anyone find her interesting?" And they say 200,000 people showed up for her funeral. They claim, I don't know. Even if it was 50,000, that sounds like a lot. But mostly she was popular with gangsters, and they say any movie that couldn't sell, if it wasn't making it in the first week, they would immediately throw some cash at her, edit a few scenes, and insert some sing and dance cabaret scene with her in it, and the movie would have immediate success. Mahvash. Mahvash, this is my playlist, and Shahin and Afat Bazari uh, playlist of songs. There's a there's a lot. There's a lot of stuff. Here's Jamila singing again. I mean dancing. The voice behind them a lot of times was Ahdieh. She never showed her face, but she was the voice behind. Um, this is a more Western kind of a scene. The guests are all like spiffy and Western looking, yet the song and dance is so primitive. The voice. Just so repetitive, like a riddle. But look, this is such a Western setting, and again, it's like the video channel is showing you something remotely Western, but the audio channel is giving you something completely different. Let's go back. Okay. Oh, Afat. Okay, I have a soft spot for her. I don't know. I think she was more talented than she was. She actually sings kind of in tune. She has a few cute songs, and but obviously she was just regarded as a Bazari minstrel singer, and that was that. And let me see if I can. Oh, this is that Shahin in a Shoberi in Los Angeles. That's her in the 80s get up in Los Angeles. And the music, typical Persian singing, it's just not very attractive. Um, but again, the visuals look Western, but the audio is not really cutting it. Let's play something with Fat, just so that we have more samples of Bazari minstrelly cabaret singers. Use busy. Give me kisses.
آفت جان گشته بی وفا میکشی ما را میکشی عاشقان این طرف آن طرف روز و شب یارم شو غزالی دل ربا شو خورنایی و صورتی آشنا خوب و زیبایی میکشد مرا یار بی وفا خدا غم جزایی ای نگار من گل آذر من بگو به من کجی شو غزالی شو خورنا
So chopped.
زنده به خیل پای خود بر لبم دیدم آسود کارا لحظه ای از غم
Rosanne Omid is the movie. Okay, well, I mean, that's a bit of a flavor. I hope, uh, I don't know who's gonna be watching this video. If you found it interesting, please put a like so the YouTube algorithm can recommend it to other people. It's a pretty weird, specialized, bizarre content. You may feel you were on the wrong side of the internet tonight, but it's pretty late, and I hope you got something. It's like a little window into some kind of culture from way back, on the other side of the planet, 70 years ago, and how human beings adapt to a new environment, to a new world, and their attempts to modernize, modernize in some ways, but not quite in other ways. All right, I hope you found it helpful, and maybe we'll see you again in some other video. Take care.